Okay, so we're starting a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and we have a legend and a leader, Chris Barton, here, the founder of Shazam, founder of Guard. I'm just a really smart, successful, interesting guy that has really changed the entire music landscape and revolutionized that industry. And it's completely different today because of his impact. So it's great to have you here, Chris.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
So Great. So I'd love to just start out by just getting into your background and just going into, just the beginning, before even the days of Shazam. Were you always into music? Was that a passion of yours?
No, actually, I have to admit that I do love music, but I definitely have to tell you that I have not like in any way some kind of music expert. I wasn't the kind of person that could name all the bands or name the members of the bands or name the albums or anything. I just like I was a pretty normal person. I would just hear music. So, and to this day, I just consider myself just a pretty normal music listener. In fact, that made me more in need of something like Shazam.
Huh. Okay. Well, I mean, that definitely makes sense because if there's, if you had the need for the product, then, it makes sense to build it, and that's usually the best types of products. So you basically were in this, in this space essentially where you felt like there was a niche and need for this type of recognition product. Like, how did that develop? Where did you come up with this idea for Shazam?
Yeah, so I'd say so. One thing that many people may not realize is that people think of Shazam as this very popular app, which it is,
Yeah.
2 billion downloads to date. But when we launched Shazam, we launched it actually 6 years before apps came
Wow.
out. Yeah,
Wow.
6 years. And in fact, we started the company 8 years before Shazam, before
Yeah.
any apps came to the world. So we essentially created an app 8 years before apps.
Hmm.
Crazy. So when we launched Shazam, the way it works is you actually dialed a phone number, literally a phone number. You made a phone call, and so we got a four-digit phone number for launch. So it's like a bit like dialing 411 or 911 or whatever. So we had a four-digit number. You dialed this phone number. You made a phone call, held your phone up in the air, and our we had an interactive voice response system that answered the phone. We would record 15 seconds of sound. We would end the call, terminate the call, and then what we had your caller ID. So we sent a text message with the name of the song and the album and artist to your phone. And that's how Shazam launched. Yeah, crazy, huh? So, but we had to work with what technology was available at the time, and that's all you could do. On the phones were those old Nokia phones, and Ericsson phones and Samsung phones, just old phones basically. And this is in 2002 when we launched, right? So all you could really do with those phones was make phone calls and send text messages. That was pretty much it. There was one other thing. Nokia phones had a little game called Snake that was preloaded on the phone. And then one of the really advanced thing is there was a thing called ringtones, and they were
Okay.
monophonic ringtones that you could download to your phone. And every time someone called you, they would make a different ringtone. But anyway, so that's the world. So really, where did the idea for Shazam come from? With your question? Well, basically,
Yeah.
I was an entrepreneur. I was actually doing my MBA at Berkeley, and I was
Okay.
thinking, like, what else could we do with these phones? I mean, everyone has mobile phones, and they're all walking around with them in their
Right.
pocket. And then what else can we do with them? And then I came up with the idea, like, what if you could identify songs? Wouldn't that be
Mhm.
amazing? And so
Yeah.
that's where the idea came from, uh, to begin with. Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's always phones out there. They're ubiquitous essentially at that point. So you thought you could recognize songs just with a mic on a phone. I mean, it was a basic interface. It wasn't that advanced at the time.
Yeah, well, so that okay, so I was about to get to that. So that's really the really interesting part of it. I'd like for any aspiring entrepreneur is when you like break the mold and come up with something really breakthrough, really unique thinking. It's known as first principles thinking. Obviously, if you've read
Yeah.
about that, like Steve Jobs, Henry Ford, Leonardo da Vinci, they all use first principles thinking, questioning the assumptions. So the original idea for Shazam was using traditional thinking. And traditional thinking was that what is possible given what we know. And what we knew at the time is that there were already technologies that monitored radio stations. Okay.
Hmm.
So they monitored thousands of radio stations. Um, but so there were actually several companies building services that were building off of these monitoring technologies. And the original idea for Shazam was to do the same. It was literally just going to be like you would literally take out your phone, you'd type in the radio station you're listening to, and then you'd get the information about what song was playing. And that was Shazam. That was the original idea for Shazam. The breakthrough idea was to do
Uh,
it using the sound to the microphone. That's something that no one had ever done.
Right.
Um,
It's a
and
whole
it
different product. It's a
a
whole
whole
different
different
product.
product. And it required, frankly, we found out there was no technology that could do it. So we had to invent that technology.
Uh-huh. And when you were trying to invent it, Chris, I read up that you've had to find like a technical co-founder, like somebody who understood how to even build this like audio recognition technology out. Like, how did you even go about finding someone? I mean, this technology didn't exist. You had to just find somebody, I guess, close enough in the sound space.
Yeah, so I started by just Googling and trying to figure out, okay, what type of expertise is the expertise that you'd have to have in order to invent a pattern recognition technology for music. And what I concluded after just doing a few Google searches was that there are these people that are PhDs in electrical engineering, but specifically focused on signal processing. And within signal processing and digital signal processing, there's different types, but one is audio digital signal processing. And then within that, there's some people that have an interest in music. And so it turned out that two of the main academic centers where some of these people were studying were MIT Media Lab and Stanford. And so we approached people at those places and just said, this is what we want to invent. Now, unfortunately, they all said we have no idea how to do that, and it's impossible
Huh.
because it's a really, really hard problem to solve. No one had ever done it before. But that is where we started, and yes, we recruited the fourth co-founder, who is the technical co-founder, to invent this. We recruited that person from, and he had his PhD from Stanford.
Uh-huh. And initially, when you were having these kind of conversations, did people, Chris, did they think you were crazy? Were they like, how's this even possible? Like, I mean, you were really ahead of the time, and there have been companies that have started much earlier than when they really could hit this mass adoption point, and they failed. Like, there was a predecessor to Instacart that, mobile delivery really wasn't that important at the time, and phones weren't ready, and failed. But then years later, Instacart became a thing. Someone else started the business, and it was already an existing idea. So how did that, how did you guys basically figure it out as of that point?
So the question is, how do we figure out building a business, basically?
Oh, I mean, how did you figure out the right person to go and work with you? I mean, people must have thought you were quite, was quite ahead of the time. Why would someone want to get in right then?
Yeah. Well, no one thought it was ahead of its time because when you're at a specific point in time, you don't realize that you're ahead of your time, right? So it's
I
not
guess.
like, hey, but Chris, like the App Store is going to launch in 8 years' time, so we should just wait until then, right? I mean, no one knows that, right? So,
Right.
so at the time, you feel like you're at the most advanced time. It's only years later that you realize that you're ahead of your time. But look, it was hard to convince people, right? Because we're basically
Sure.
trying to convince someone to join as a co-founder to invent a technology that they thought was impossible. I mean, they had no idea how to do it.
Right.
Uh, but but also really, really amazing people, really, really smart people who love the idea of breaking new ground, inventing new things. So we went to a professor at Stanford, and this professor was world renowned in this field. His name is Julius Smith, and he had invented the algorithms that are behind Yamaha synthesizers, which are today
Okay.
used around the world. He
Sure.
had he had
Yeah.
he had detected submarines under the water by using the sounds of submarines.
Oh my.
So yeah, this guy was an expert, or is still an expert in audio signal processing. And basically, we showed him this list of names that we had gathered in our research, and all who had PhDs in audio signal processing, mostly from MIT and Stanford and
Okay.
Berkeley. And we showed him the list, and he knew them all because they all go to the same conferences, and many of them had
Right. I'm sure.
under him. He had read their papers, and they're all extremely talented, smart people. And Julius, the professor, became an advisor to our company. And
Hmm.
the first project we assigned him was, please rank the five smartest people on this list, because we need them as our co-founder, and we need them. We need the best chance we can get of someone to invent this technology. How am I going to know who the smartest is? They all were incredibly smart, but we needed someone deeply theoretical to really be thinking outside the box on how they're going to invent this algorithm. And so we ranked the five smartest, and then made that our kind of target list for recruiting the fourth genius technical co-founder of Shazam.
Uh-huh. And so, Chris, when you were doing that and you're trying to put this team together to build this new technology, I mean, what did your family think? I mean, what were they as of that point? Like you're building this company, it's kind of you're scaling it, but you're not at this point yet where it can go as mainstream as we all know today. I mean, what were they thinking at that time? Were they supportive?
I definitely would not have told them about what I was doing because they think it's crazy. uh, You know, my parents, I actually, what part of the inspiration for me is that I'm non-technical, right? I was an economics
Right.
major in college and MBA, but I grew up in a world of science in the sense that both my parents are PhDs in physics. My dad's a nuclear
Really?
physicist. Yeah, so in a way that gave me this inspiration that you can create amazing things and do amazing things with science. And it's that exact perspective that made me feel like this should be feasible because if a human brain can do it, why can't a computer do it? And so when
Right.
once I had made some headway, I did take it to my dad, who's a very discerning about his opinions on things, and he held me to a very high standard on the business plan and told me that it needed a lot of improvement. But I didn't tell him until I had already kind of cracked the code and found a co-founder.
Smart.
So yeah, so.
Yeah. So you're building this out, right? And now you're kind of putting together the team. Did you need funding initially? And if you did, where did you get the funding from? Who was willing to back this idea?
So to do the very first stuff that I'm talking about of finding the technical co-founder and actually even working to invent the algorithm, we did that
Right.
without any funding at all. So we were
Okay.
just completely, I mean, there was actually almost no cost because we didn't pay ourselves. We had no office space. Literally the only cost we had was buying a very specific piece of software called MATLAB so that we could run algorithm tests.
Right.
Uh, and that was it. So that was $1,000. So that $1,000 was pretty much it was the only money that we spent. And with that money, we invented an algorithm. And it's
Wow.
actually quite amazing to think that out of the
Yeah.
$140 million that Shazam raised, the most important thing that we ever did was to invent this algorithm, and we did it for $1,000.
Yeah.
Pretty incredible, huh? That's true scrappiness, you know. And I really believe that many of the great entrepreneurs out there are incredibly scrappy. That's you got to be scrappy. That's what it all comes back to. But yeah, so that might answer your question. But yes, we then had to raise money to actually build the beginnings of something that we could really demonstrate, you know, a music database and so on and so on.
And Chris, is that same algorithm that you guys developed? Is that the algorithm that's still used today? I mean, how much has it changed today?
And we definitely use the same algorithm today, but it's also evolved significantly. So
Uh-huh.
we iterated it, made it better, faster, more scalable, more robust to noise, and so on. So it had many improvements. We had many things to tackle, such as music gets played at different speeds by DJs and by radio stations, and they adjust the pitch and so on and so on. And plus, we wanted to make it more and more robust in noise, and then of course, as we got a lot of users, we had to make it highly even more scalable. I mean, Shazam serves
Right.
a lot of people that use Shazam every month. So yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean that definitely makes a lot of sense. It's the scaling of it was interesting. Like what was the initial what was the initial catalyst to scaling Shazam? Like once the algorithm was done, you have this mobile app. Like how did it catch on? Was there marketing behind it or just people just word of mouth started using it and then they're like, "Oh, this product's great. Like it's the best music recognition app out."
Yeah, it really came down to word of mouth. I mean, Shazam is not viral. You know, so viral is, as you probably know, the definition of viral is that by using it, you're inherently introducing someone new to it. And so like text messaging is viral and WhatsApp, Snapchat, so on, email, all viral things, but and Facebook obviously. But Shazam is not. By using it, you're not inherently introducing someone new to it. So it was all word of mouth, much like Google, where people just loved it and they talked about it.
Huh.
And Shazam had an incredible word of mouth because it just had that delightful experience. People couldn't believe that it worked, and they had to show it to their friends, right? You had to say, "You got to check this out," and that would make like a memorable moment. It was almost magical, and it became like a verb. And many people will
Yeah.
actually say they'll remember the first time they used it. So it really has that,
Really?
yeah. And so that it has that magical first experience that really helps lead to that incredible word of mouth growth, and to the point where we would consistently get 8 million new downloads a month. And imagine that's almost all being driven by word of mouth. There was pretty much no marketing budget.
Uh-huh. That's amazing. 8 million a month, just word of mouth. The power of word of mouth, I think, is really underestimated.
Yeah, I mean, we were lucky to have achieved that. I mean, we hit the world with sort of an app that was useful, compelling, easy to use, delightful, magical, and available on the mainstream
Mhm.
platforms, Apple and Android for free. So I mean,
Right.
but it doesn't mean it's easy to do. not every app is able to achieve that. So I feel very fortunate that we happened to invent something that so many people wanted to use.
And how did the acquisition with Apple happen? Were there other potential buyers that were interested in Shazam? Like, did they just reach out and you guys were interested to sell at that point? Did you want to part with the company? I mean, this you're building. You said 6 years even before the iPhone came out. You're building this for some time.
Yeah, many acquisitions are a result of having a close relationship with the acquiring partner. Acquiring,
Okay.
that's a very common thing. And Shazam had a very close relationship with Apple. We
Huh.
years before Apple acquired Shazam, we were already one of their biggest affiliates for iTunes. Before the days of streaming music, we would drive over $300 million a year of people downloading music.
Wow,
Um,
really?
yeah, so just astronomical impact. Um, we
So they
also were,
noticed that.
yeah, so they knew about Shazam and
Yeah.
the powered music recognition for Siri. That was a partnership where we were, if you could say to Siri, what's this song, and it would actually be Shazam that was identifying it. And we were always a partner with Apple for the launch of their new platforms and the new capabilities that different versions of iOS would have. So they're very very close. Shazam and Apple were very close. But we did go through a traditional process of when the company was bought, of kind of taking it out to market and having conversations with multiple large companies. But ultimately, Apple was the best fit for us. I mean, music is very strategic to Apple, clearly with Apple Music, and it just so complementary to when you're
Mm.
going to have unlimited usage of listening to music, which is streaming. You're the biggest thing you need is discovery, and Shazam ultimately has changed the way
Right.
that people discover music in their daily lives.
Mhm. Yeah, it definitely has. And I think there's been a lot more of a focus now, like with apps like Spotify on music discovery, because that's how you retain users essentially. It's just getting more people to discover more songs. Um, and really the medium of exchange of music has changed a lot. Just radio and recognition versus now it's a lot more of these mobile apps and streaming apps. So it's really kind of, changed a lot. You throughout your career, you focused a lot on mobile development at Dropbox, at Google, and you have a bunch of different patents over there. How do you think that your knowledge from Shazam, building Shazam, translated over to your developments in mobile and enhanced the mobile experience for both those platforms?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, I'm non-technical, so it turns out that really one of my great passions as I moved on to companies like Google and Dropbox, where I spent 12 years,
Right.
many of those are years when I would continue to serve on the board of Shazam up until the acquisition by Apple. It turned out that really what I enjoyed the most and what my skill set brought was non-technical. So it was actually partnerships. And
Yeah.
what I focused on at both Google and Dropbox was partnerships. But you guessed
Mm.
it, partnerships in the mobile industry. Because
Yeah.
one thing I had to do as the CEO, founding CEO of Shazam, was partner up with the mobile phone companies. And it is no simple task when you're partnering with a large behemoth like companies such as Verizon, AT&T, so on, right?
Mm.
The large mobile phone companies around the world. So that became sort of by accident an expertise that I had, and it's something that's what I ended up focusing on at both Google and Dropbox. I put in place the first big mobile partnerships for both companies and for the Android team at Google with large carriers like AT&T and T and Verizon and the equivalents around the world, because there's large carriers all over the world, Vodafone and
Mm.
Europe and so on. It's quite complicated navigating those huge companies and thinking
Sure.
in the mindset of a mobile phone company, what do they want? And
Mm.
that became an area that I was really passionate about.
Yeah. And why, like, Chris, why decide to go from, you said you were still on the board of Shazam at the time, but why go from running the startup to also working at other people's companies? Why do that transition? Why not just solely focus on Shazam or even start something new? I mean, I know you started Guard, this company focusing on AI and this alarm-like system Impulse, which is definitely quite interesting. I think there's a great niche for it. But why launch that after or not, or something not before?
Yeah, I think I was at a point. Starting your own company is pretty exhausting. It's fun, but it's also exhausting,
Yeah.
especially when you're going really swinging for the fences. And Shazam went through a long period of struggling, near bankruptcy for many years, right? From launch
Mm.
all the way to the App Store, 6 year period of barely surviving. So
Yeah.
And back then, this is like, ancient times. Back then, it was quite common that sort of young entrepreneurs that are unproven really were there. The expectation was from the venture capitalists was that you're gonna hire in the seasoned management that's gonna manage their money much more carefully and know how to manage a team. And so that's what I did. I hired my own boss. I hired my own CEO. A
Hmm.
seasoned CEO had run big companies to be the CEO of Shazam. And and then meanwhile, as I said, Shazam sort of struggled for years and years. So I decided, I did my 4 years of Shazam. I had been CEO of the company. And I thought, what better than go join another exciting rocket ship and then sort of keep my role at Shazam as a board member. That way I can kind of have the
Hmm.
best of both worlds. So I
Right.
was fortunate. I was able to join Google when it was still a private company, just months before it went public. I joined
Really?
only 2,000 employees, and it was just an exciting time to be part of, the formation of an incredible company.
Mhm.
And same with Dropbox. I joined Dropbox about 7 years after that. I joined Dropbox when it was only 90 people, duct tape on the floor, sort of very scrappy. And then, of course, it grew to be, in the thousands of employees and became a public company. So both experiences were really amazing. And I didn't have to let go of Shazam because I kind of maintained my board role. And we had hired in management running the company.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like you got the best of both worlds. You got to also learn and learn so much from these companies as they scaled. I mean, that must have been quite an experience there. You're on the ground floor. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
absolutely. I forgot to mention that. I really learned so much. And a lot of things that I learned from incredible people at Google and Dropbox that I was able to bring back to Shazam, which was a much smaller company and just over 200 employees compared to these
Mhm.
behemoth companies that were thousands or tens of
Yeah.
thousands of employees. So yeah, I learned a lot there. And then as you mentioned, since then I've now moved on to being focused on keynote speaking, but also
Mhm.
incubating and sort of bootstrapping my own startup, which is focused on it's an impact-driven company. It's called Garden. It's the goal is to use computer vision AI to save lives by preventing drowning in swimming pools.
Yeah, I mean, the idea makes a lot of sense. There needs to be some sort of system for pools. The problem exists, and what's the solution currently? So it seems like you're the only one that's trying to figure something out here.
Yeah, I mean, look. There are other startups trying to do it, as there are for almost anything, any idea you come up
Mhm.
with. But the reality is that the big companies with the greatest talent in AI and computer vision and so on typically go after the biggest markets, like self-driving cars.
Right.
And drowning detection is not a giant market. Right? It's not anyone who wants to make a big 100 million or $1 billion company would better not go after drowning detection because it's just not big. But it is meaningful. You can save some lives, and that's really what's motivating me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that definitely makes sense. It's a great niche and something that you could really dominate in and create a great product that helps people's lives. So impact driven is the way to go. I want to just do one quick test, Chris. We're going to do like a little bit of song recognition, see how good you are.
All right.
Yeah, here's the first one, okay? You could just say the song once you know what it is.
That's Sister Sledge. We are family.
Okay, great. One for one. Let's do one more.
And I have to admit, I have Shazam sitting here right in my hand.
Oh my, no cheating.
Yeah, because if it weren't for that, I would be a little lost.
The goal is to see how well you can do it.
Okay, all right. I'm holding it here so you can see I'm not using it.
Okay.
Oh God, I remember that song, and I just can't. You see, I'm terrible. I'm absolutely
Come on,
terrible.
you got to get this.
I can't even almost feel like I can hum it. Journey, Journey.
Okay, but what's the name of the song?
I have absolutely no
Shazam's
idea.
got to get it. We try Shazam.
Don't stop believing. I love
Okay,
perfect one for the talk today.
exactly.
Yeah, so I really need Shazam. That's why you got to have it on you at all times.
Exactly. There's a real use for it. People need it.
And
Yeah.
what I really need is like I walk the streets and every once in a while I see someone wearing a really cool pair of sneakers and I need a Shazam for sneakers so I can just be like, what is that? I love that. I love that pair right there. I need to know what that is.
Yeah, I mean, video Shazam could really be something that's used. There's so many different products people wear, and they go wonder what they are, and they want to go buy them. Yeah, that'd be great.
It would be cool. It would be cool.
Yeah. Well, Chris, look, definitely great to have you here. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today and to speak with our audience. And I think there's a lot of important lessons that you've learned throughout your career and through what you've created and what you continuously create that a lot of people can relate to their journeys and learn from and to really have an impact themselves too. So I thank you for taking the time.
Thanks a lot, Ben.